Planning is really important with this curriculum because if a teacher tries to step into the classroom without having done the planning and preparation, this is not a pick up and go curriculum. This really requires teachers to think about their specific students.
Good afternoon. We are here for our PLC today.
You still need to plan. You still need to adjust it to fit the needs of your children. Once you begin to use the curriculum, you can see where it's easy to modify and adapt without losing the essence of the lesson.
You have to make it your own and use it based on what you know about the kids.
This is my second year implementing EL as a curriculum. I spent a lot of time my first year reading through the lessons, reading through all the materials online, going through the supporting materials book. And this year, I have a better foundational knowledge, having spent time going deep into the books the first year.
Long-range planning or year-long planning happens before the year begins, and it's important to know how the standards are going to show up across the year, knowing which standards are going to repeat, and also knowing how the standards are progressing in rigor. Mid-range or module level planning needs to happen before the module begins. I'd recommend a few weeks in advance so that you can make sure that those experts that you need or community members or any field work that needs to happen is booked in advance and is ready to go.
Module 2.
It's also really important during the mid-range planning to focus in on the performance task. That's the end goal of the module. So making sure you understand where students are going so that you can help them to get there through the course and through the path of the module. Short range or unit level planning needs to happen before the unit begins. It's really important to begin with the assessments to know where students are going to go, where you're driving them to through the unit, and possibly even test driving those assessments so that you understand what's going to be required of students. Up close planning or lesson level planning needs to happen before the lesson begins. It's a really important opportunity to understand the flow of the lesson, how the instruction is going to meet the learning targets. As with all planning, consider the lesson through the lens of your specific student.
Ms. Davidson, I know this is your second year of implementing Module 2, and this will be your first year implementing Module 2.
For fourth grade, yes.
Grade, okay.
Ms. Dixon is really helpful in steadying us and coaching us to use exactly what we need for our specific students.
So we'll start off with a little data. We've just finished our...
Well, I guide the PLC meetings by using data first and the target, where are we trying to go. I think that's a highlight for me with PLCs.
So shout out to you too and your good work. Keep in mind the students, those 3 students who have not met as we're planning. How can we make activities work for them as well to bring them up to the grade level? Then we're going to move on into planning Module 2, Animal Defenses. And I'm going to let Ms. Davidson lead this because she is the expert in 4th grade Module 2 at the table with her second year of implementation of Module 2.
Awesome. Okay, so big picture overview, our guiding questions that we need to keep in mind are 1, how do animals' bodies and behaviors help them survive? And 2, how can writers... This Venom book was their favorite, I think, because it had so many pictures and it's kind of all about venomous animals, animals that sting, animals that have poison as their defense mechanism. Before our planning meetings, we make sure that each teacher has read through the text so that they can understand what is going to be exciting and interesting for kids to read that we can build off to support them in learning. I think, too, one of the reasons they really liked it is because it was something that they could relate to.
Rereading a text, I would recommend every time you're planning for a module, even if you've already taught that module before, you reread the text through the lens of the specific students you're going to teach, so that you can really understand how that text is going to impact your specific students.
At the beginning, when we're just in Unit 1 building background knowledge, we could focus on, bees. Because that's the one last year where I felt like they really started getting it, because they've all played in the summer and got a bee sting and they felt the pain, and so they understand how the defense mechanism works. Okay, here's this bee. And then, when we go towards animals that are more abstract or outside their environment,
They can make connections.
They can make connections as to why that defense mechanism would help them in their habitat.
Yeah.
The unit at a glance gives us approximately 2.5 weeks for the unit as a whole. And it looks like it starts with just building background knowledge, and then it goes into researching them. And we start out with this text. When we plan each module, we think about what the students are bringing to the table, what they can relate to, what is an opportunity this curriculum presents to help them grow their view of the world, and how we can use their knowledge to get them there. This one is focusing on getting ready for your informational writing. So maybe this is when we could do groups.
And they have their original painted essay to use as a guide, and they actually type it in their Chromebooks where it's laid out for them by color. They know which part goes where.
Information, 2 proof paragraphs, and a conclusion.
Yeah.
It actually works out real well, since the module is focusing on informational. Your next assessment is on informational,
so it
you'll
matches.
be able to look at that data.
Yeah.
And see if it's working.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Do we want to assign groups to kind of evenly disperse reading abilities, or do we want to introduce all the animals and let students naturally select to where their interest is?
Yeah, I like
to
them
see
being able
if
to pick their own.
to give them a little more choice. All right, so Unit 3 is the longest. It's 3 full weeks with 15 instructional days. We're going to need to support them the most in Unit 3, because in our standards, we've covered informational literature and informational writing. So they've found evidence. They would have done informational writing before, but we have not done narrative writing yet. They're going to have to write 2 separate endings to their narrative writing.
Do you think it would be beneficial if we extended past the 13 or the 3 weeks? I'm sorry.
I think
to give students.
I
more
think
time
we
to
could
grasp.
take off. If we wanted to keep within the same time frame, I think we could take a little bit of time from Unit 2 and put it towards Unit 3, because they do have a stronger background in informational writing, and they don't have that background going into this. I think what we could do is, instead of cutting out a lesson, I think we could combine some of the days of writing, since they do have from all block, the writing stamina. They have pretty good writing stamina, I would say. So we could combine lessons 7, 8, and 9, even 10. So we have, I think we should keep the beginning, the research portion of it. I don't think we should cut lessons or time out of that, because they would need the content knowledge to be able to write it.
Your culminating task, how comfortable are you feeling with implementing the culminating task?
In Module 1, we brought in Miss Teresa as an expert in the field of poetry to go with their culminating task. And I feel like we have, we could do the beekeepers, we could even find an expert from the zoo to do something with the content knowledge. But I wonder if I love being able to think about how we can bring in their community and experts that they know about into the curriculum to make it relevant to them.
I know they have experts at the aquarium where you could go and they'll actually talk to you about certain animals and what what their defense mechanisms are. They have experts
Oh,
there that'll take
cool.
you on a specific tour of those animals. Using our planning time to make connections to the community, I think, is important. Some of our students don't connect to it unless it means something to them.
I feel like this module is very heavy writing focused.
I think the zoo is perfect for that. As you walk through the zoo, you can see the different informational cards,
Right.
and the kids can go through and then come back and create their own.
Right. Which would go super well with their informational
Yes.
essay.
That would be fun if we were able to actually take the walk and do the note catcher with animals and then came back and wrote their own like informational card for whatever animals they saw.
Yeah. And then we could come back, read about it afterwards, so that when they're going through maybe some of that vocabulary to an understanding and being
Yeah.
able to picture the animal would help them comprehend.
So let's talk about next steps. So you'll take on field experts?
Yes.
And I can start building out graphic organizers.
And I can help trying to find one for my 3 that need to be pushed. My favorite thing about planning is the ideas that we come up with sometimes are very similar, but sometimes they're completely different. And then we're looking at each other like, that's a really great idea. I never would have thought of that. You know, it helps us teach the curriculum. It wasn't necessarily in there, but it was a way to enhance it and make it fun and interesting for the students.
So if you see any text for them that would be above grade level, I think that could be a good way to add research to their writing as well. EL gives you the tools so that then I get to spend time thinking of, okay, how can I make this relevant to my students? You have this framework and resource available to you that has given you so many tools that then I can come in and fit it together to best meet my students' needs.
This all sounds really good. Sounds like a plan. We will come back and touch base together one more time before implementation.
What you planned for last year may not work with the set of children that you have this year. So it's a constant need to plan for the children who are sitting in front of you at that time.